Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Build Workspaces. I'm here with Bryan Ossa. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Hello, doing fantastic and super excited to be chatting about all the fun stuff that we're going to be diving into. That was abstract, I know, it's by design.
Well, today I want to talk a little bit about lead velocity and
Yep.
analyzing how your leads move through the funnel over time. It's something that I've always found surprisingly difficult to do in HubSpot, despite all the improvements we've seen over the last few years to like the time and stage properties. And I think I've been getting all those warnings that some of the legacy lead properties or contact properties will be sunsetting soon.
Mm-hmm.
And making sure that everything gets moved over. But we've had those, date entered, date exited, and time and stage properties for a little while now. And they're very helpful. But when you really want to zoom out and look at what's happening to your leads as they enter your funnel over time, like, do you know if your January leads versus your July leads are moving faster or slower? If you're running a campaign in 1 month, and that campaign happens to move people through your funnel faster. Can you see that? Do you know? And so that's what I really want to dive into today.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to be discussing, particularly now, because there's quite a bit of uh, rebuilding and challenges that tend to come out at the end of this year. And And I say end of this year, but I refer more to just like all years of just like trying to do all of your annual planning for the subsequent year and wanting to get ahead of what that's going to look like for both your road mapping as well as your strategic planning. And this is a huge part of that because if you're able to get a grapple on how long leads are going to be at various different stages, you're going to have that much better information to use when you're actually planning these initiatives, in early January or the end of Q4, like we tend to be doing. And I know we were kind of chatting a little bit earlier today about some of the tools and models you've been playing with recently. And so I think those are really cool, and I'm really excited to see more about how we can kind of put that into play.
Yeah, I think your planning point is a good one there. So I saw a post from Nick Zeckett's where he was saying that everybody's neglecting the mid funnel. Like no one's
Mm-hmm.
really pushing people through and nurturing the people who are kind of hanging out in the middle. It's like we
Yeah.
see the new shiny object and we pull in new contacts and we measure ourselves against that and hitting MQLs. But if someone MQLs and doesn't progress, do you even see that? Do you know that that's happening? Do you know how long they're sitting there? Do they ever come out of there, or is it a black hole? And I think it's very difficult to see how that might change over time. I think it's easy enough to see in point reports. So like
Mm-hmm.
how many MQLs do you have and how many MQLs were not touched this week and sort of managing it from a process perspective. There are a
Mm-hmm.
lot of reporting tools in HubSpot, but when you want to zoom out and define your marketing strategy in terms of like, do we want to focus our energies and our content on, accelerating funnel versus generating new contacts to talk with, then it's really difficult to make that argument for the budget to move slightly down funnel to activate that mid funnel group, if you can't see it, if you can't model it and really show that it's going to move the needle for you. You're not just running a test, you're really backing that up with some data to know that if we work these mid funnel contacts and move them to SQL in
Mm-hmm.
1 month, then 2 months later they're going to turn into deals. If you don't have the data to back that up, especially if you can factor in seasonality and campaigns at different times of the year, then it's going to be really difficult to, argue to build that into your strategy for the next year.
Absolutely. And like even on top of that campaign, it's the medium by which you're sharing this information because you may quickly decide through some of these tests, like maybe you run an A/B test and you see like, all right, who's currently in the funnel and moving through it. And you may send them, two or three marketing promotion emails a week, and you may see that that actually causes exclusion or moves them faster. And how does that correlate to maybe engagement on social? How does that coordinate to in-app activation? There's a lot of these other attribution aspects that you'll be able to track the various different cycle, not only like from like net new through the first part of the funnel into the sales aspect, but even from just customer retention where, you got them onboarded, they're signed on the dotted line, they're giving you money, and you're just like, all right, great, have a good one. These kinds of things and how they continue to engage with you really helps you to get that information so that you can actually continue to turn them in from not only customers, but into brand evangelists. Because those evangelists are ultimately going to be what start bringing in new business for you. Because you ask any company, like, what is the number one thing that you see when you subscribe for something new in every single form? Where did you hear about us? Companies want to know about these things, and the more that you're able to show that there is a particular person speaking about this, or you can encourage people to be that person who's speaking the benefits of your organization, your product, the stronger you're going to have the stronger chance you're going to have of being able to convert those word of mouth leads.
Yeah, and it's so important to think about the cost of acquiring a new customer is always way higher than the cost of
Hmm.
retaining a customer. So
Yes.
it really, when you think about spreading your marketing budget across the entire pipeline, and even including upsells, resells, renewals, those kinds of things, it's very important to consider how you're addressing the entire pipeline top to bottom and tracking that. I think the parallels that you're drawing between sort of that customer success and onboarding side of things is something we've touched on in previous episodes,
Hmm.
where there's a lot of, customer success communication and blogs and guides and whatever around those metrics and what is the key thing that is going to get somebody to, establish that stickiness with your tool. What is the, onboarding process that you want to test to get people to not churn and sort of find that stickiness over time. And like that's
Right.
well known. Like that is what customer success, CX, all of the user testing designers, like everybody is focused on that. They've already figured out these metrics. So when we take a step back and want to make sure that we are building a pipeline to have those sticky customers that never leave us, then how long is it going to take us to get to that point and where are they coming from? And we'll
Hmm.
save a lot of the attribution talk for another day because that could be 3 episodes in and
It's a
of
whole
itself.
rabbit hole. Yeah.
Um, Small topic there. But I think when you think about the timing and the lead velocity and the lead volume that you want to track against, it's very difficult today to get that reporting and that complete understanding of what it takes to move someone through the funnel, and how long it takes someone to move through the funnel. So
Hmm.
you've teed me up here to show off my new cohort analysis template.
Ooh. Yeah,
Um,
let's take a
so
look at it.
I want to pop into there real quick. I'll just share my screen. So completely self-promotion plug here. This is a template that I've just released on my own website that you can go ahead and buy for yourself. It's a Looker template. And I've got in the Getting Started tab, it guides you through how to get this data out of HubSpot, and put it into a template to make sure that this works for you. And then once it's imported, you hit one button and you get these beautiful charts. And so this can really help you dive into when you generate however many leads that you have, um, when do they actually move down your funnel? So if you're trying to hit a lead goal or an MQL goal for, say, Q1, how long is it going to take for those Q1 leads to potentially turn into customers? And if your sales cycle is pretty long, you'll see that in the opportunity to customer conversion, and you probably have a whole lot of people looking at those numbers. But when you again zoom out and go back up the funnel just a little bit, I don't think there's enough attention paid to how long it takes someone to move through those first few steps. And you may have a simplified pipeline, or a simplified life cycle stages where maybe you don't have a sales accepted lead and sales qualified lead, and it just goes from MQL to opportunity. But even that timing can be difficult to see over time, or if there's any seasonality, or if there are trends. And if you want to chat with me, I'd be more than happy to add some filtering options to this view for, campaign associations or, sources or things like that. But this is designed to work basically out of the box with any HubSpot implementation because it relies on HubSpot system properties that are stamped behind the scenes. So it will reliably work for a whole lot of people, but there's a lot we can customize in this to really dive into, like, okay, if it was the webinar as a last touch before they MQL'd, did that move them faster? If they viewed a product demo at some point, did that move them faster through your funnel? And when you can start to apply those kinds of filters and have this view, it makes a lot more sense. And when you're trying to get to the actual numbers of how long your contacts are in a single stage, once again, you can see that in total aggregate in HubSpot, but really diving into it to understand if there's any seasonality gets really difficult. And so we've calculated that for you here in the days and stage monthly average.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And like the days in stage average is really a good place to kind of start drilling in further because to your point, the cohort analysis, just from the first impressions, like it's extremely valuable to see where everyone's sitting month over month just to see, how many people are in the MQL stage versus, like you said, the sales qualified and moving all the way down through customer. And you see those numbers uh, grow and shrink as the tide flows within your business. But that days in stage is really the big part that just kind of takes you that level further of just knowing that while these numbers are kind of going up, this is able to get you a lot more granular on these individual users and show how long they're there. So maybe you can start making some adjustments. Because if you start seeing, for example, like just looking at just like the example data that we have put into play, like you have an average days for your MQL. If you're sitting there and looking at a delta of 147 for January, and you're bringing in 100, you have 101 who are 101 days that is average in that stage, versus, that's roughly that's roughly, you know, that's a long time. I don't know what sentence
Three
I
and
was
a
trying
half
to put in there,
months.
but like that's a good chunk of time.
Yeah,
But if
basically
you start
your
yeah,
leads are sitting in MQL for the entire quarter in this dummy data that I have in here. And so that
exactly.
means that your planning has to extend well beyond a single quarter. And again, this depends on sort of your sales process and your time to close and all of that. It's really dependent on your business, what you would expect these numbers to be. But I think getting the visibility is always the first step. And I will say, I think you can get to a pretty comparable chart in HubSpot reports, but since the question after looking at this cohort analysis tab is usually like, okay, well, then how long does it take? I figured I would just make it really easy to pop over there and see how you can answer that question. Um, but if you know that things slow down in July, as so many businesses do,
Hmm.
especially if you're working with Europe in July and August, you can start to plan ahead for that and be like, all right, well, nothing moves in July and August. So let's try to fill the pipeline or work around that, or like we can take that time off too because nothing's happening anyway. Well, now you get to make that argument because you can actually see the data laid out for you.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And that's absolutely amazing. And the fact that you can have this just built built in natively with the HubSpot data is like a huge win because I've built these reports before. I know many other people who have too, and usually having to get this information just requires so much custom property building that is leveraging you're leveraging out of the box, but you're really having to kind of do the good old workaround in order to get the actual data that you want to see. Versus this just kind of solves that. This kind of really helps solve that problem. And what I'm looking at this, like my logic isn't like, okay, this solves everything for me, but it does give a whole lot of information so that you can make your decisions more strategically and with more context in mind. Because ultimately, that context is going to be what drives everything forward. So this is really
Yeah.
cool in my mind.
And exactly to that point, again, thank you for teeing it up. You can embed Looker dashboards back into HubSpot dashboards. So keeping everything in the same place to have that context and really building your workspaces to be decision oriented, you can pull this over and just drop it in. And I haven't tested it for real, but I know that you can embed Looker dashboards. And so I'll report back on what that looks like when you actually drop it into a portal. But I
Yep,
will
you
stop my
can, and they're
timer.
visible as long as you have permissions enabled and you're logged in via the Google account associated with it. Assuming those
Yeah.
two things are in place, you're fine.
Yeah, there's always that challenge of permissions and visibility. But I
Mm-hmm.
think the thinking through sort of that pipeline velocity and how you're tracking things and how you're planning out your next year, um, it's so difficult to know what's going to happen. And all we can do is base it on historical data. I've worked with a lot of startups, and it's always difficult to trust historical data, um,
Hmm.
which can make it really difficult to plan ahead, or make any arguments for why your marketing budget should change in any meaningful way. And running experiments can be really difficult. But when you've got the right set of data in front of you and you're assessing it against the right KPIs, even if you have completely changed your strategy, you still have something to go off of,
Hmm.
and move ahead in your planning.
Exactly. And that does all kinds of good things, not only for marketing, but for like your sales and your onboarding retaining team and your potential like support and churn team too, because this isn't just managing lead flow. This helps you understand what individual capacities look like as well. And so you can plan those resources accordingly across your team. So, like for example, like if you see that maybe it's 3 months for an MQL, but but there's an 80% chance that those 3 months in an MQL lead to a 2 weeks in sales. That's going to tell you that basically in 3.5 months, you're probably going to be having a massive onboarding of people. And
Mm.
do you have the resources? Do you have the tools? Do you have the support in order to provide all of that to your organization, like through your organization to those new constituents who are now paying for your services? These kinds of reporting allow you to do all of that and plan accordingly. Again, just to make sure it's not just the marketing side of things. Like this is full stack business planning, and that's
Yeah.
hugely valuable.
Yeah. When you start to segment this up, I mean, this is kind of a holistic view of the pipeline. It's really looking at, contact life cycle stages in this example, and how they move through all the way to an opportunity. We know that life cycle stages can get really complicated, and when you
Hmm.
pull them together with deal stages, it gets confusing. HubSpot does try to help us out with some of the automations on the back end that are settings, um, to keep that data a little bit cleaner. But even when you start to chunk out those different pipelines, you've got sort of the top of funnel and middle of funnel marketing pipeline. Then you've got your actual sales pipeline, your deal pipeline in HubSpot. And then you've got your onboarding and renewal pipelines beyond that. We're all actually trying to measure the same metrics. Like, we
Hmm.
all want to know, how long does it take to get from point A to point B? How many people are going to make it from point A to point B? And how do we structure our resources to better those numbers, and also make sure that it's a positive experience, user experience from beginning to end, so that we are serving people with enough resources to really get through that. But it is really funny to see those parallels between all of the different departments. It's like, we probably aren't even talking to each other about these KPIs. Like, I should hope that someone like a CEO is looking at that. But when you're coming into, a department head meeting, we're not sitting down and saying like, all right, well, our deal velocity number is, whatever, and it takes
Yeah.
3 months, and it doesn't, like, I can almost guarantee that people are not sitting down and having that conversation.
Yeah. And if you are, then that's awesome. Like keep
Right.
doing that. This just helps you further empower your knowledge so that you're giving the most accurate information that you can and not just going off of hearsay or like to a large degree just we'll call it like an assumption. Granted, yes, these are also assumptions, but it's a data-informed assumption. It's not
Mhm.
an assumption based off of gut feel.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to that. And those are things that I know a lot more businesses are trying to work your way around how to solve. And so the more you're able to kind of get yourself behind it and get your team speaking in the same language, that is essentially, here's what this process looks like. Here's how we need to be looking at the various different steps. Here's what that is going to mean for us, in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. The more effective you're going to be at having an aligned strategy throughout your company, and the less likely you are to have disparity and friction points between net new as all the way through your customer's life cycle.
Yeah, I always come at this from a marketing side because that's where most of my career started. And when I think about the way that your company matures into marketing, marketing's head is always first one to go. But
Hmm.
when you do actually strategically grow your company, one of the first splits that your marketing team will likely see as you grow is demand gen versus lifecycle or retention marketing.
Hmm.
They should overlap quite a bit. The type of content that's going to bring in new customers should also be, a lot of the ones that the same content that moves them further down the funnel. You want to think about your content strategy across the whole funnel. But knowing how long it takes to get someone through that funnel and then what it takes to keep them um, is a very important thing to think about as you start to staff up your marketing team and add additional resources. So when they start to split, you need to know where are we, pushing these resources and what impact do we expect them to have over time. And getting that visibility and understanding those KPIs and understanding the historical data to begin with is all going to get you to the point where you can make the right hires to grow your company as efficiently and as fast as possible.
Exactly right. And that is, I would say, like a perfect way to kind of like slowly start bringing everything here full circle, because honestly, there's nothing else I can really add to the note that was already just made. Like you've got me there. So like I think that nail hits the nail on the head and tells a really great story about how to use this information where it can take you.
Yeah, awesome. We'll tie it off there then. So we'll see everyone next week. I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. And Bryan, see you next Tuesday.
Yep. Ciao. Enjoy the week, everyone. Catch you next week.